So back in the 90s growing up, and it seemed like everyone else around me was enjoying Chef Boyardee and Lucky Charms, TV dinners, and Pop-Tarts. My European parents were really, really into growing food in their backyard garden. And man, I liked it then, but little did I know how profound of an effect that would have on my life. And in the spring, there would always be foraging the dandelion in the backyard along with a few other wild greens. I want to talk about that today because it is amazing. You know, my dad was from Greece, and they would create a wild greens dish with dandelions and other things like this called horta, and we had this all the time. My Italian American mother would really appreciate it as well, and she would just go on these rants about how ridiculous it is that people would just be working so hard to spray these beautiful blossoms, you know, these dots of yellow that would just appear in our yard, especially since they were so edible and so medicinal and so good for you. You know, our modern culture has been at war with dandelions for many years now, and the dandelion is very much winning. Like, they are so resilient and strong. And speaking of the Mediterraneans and other cultures, they would have this adage and this theory that when we eat things that are very strong and healthy and resilient, it leads to strong and healthy and resilient people in their health. So the dandelion is such a healthy and beautiful plant that pops up in the spring. TJ mentioned that it's kind of like spring cleaning, and that is just so true. It's one of those first fresh things that are coming up after the winter to revive you. I just want to talk about some of these benefits. The internet is loaded with the benefits, but we're just going to highlight a few, but also maybe some practical ways to use dandelions, utilize it, to cook it for both nourishment and for medicine. So the properties are, well, first off, this plant that we've been at war with is one of the healthiest plants that we could eat. It is so high in vitamins and minerals. Now, the whole plant is edible all the way from the root to the blossoms. There are so many benefits that we couldn't describe here, but each portion of the plant will have a slightly different concentration of those benefits. So some beautiful benefits of this plant include it being a diuretic. It is extremely cleansing and detoxing for the liver. It helps revive the liver. And what were you saying that it's really good for the liver with?
Yeah, the entire plant would be beneficial for the liver, but the flowers especially, which is kind of neat, is one of the highest herbal sources of lecithin. And lecithin is this fatty kind of component that has high concentrations of what are called phosphatidylcholine, phosphatidylserine, and phosphatidylcholine is extremely beneficial for the liver. In fact, lecithin culinarily is used to emulsify fats, which is interesting because once consumed and in the body, it's known to actually be very supportive of conditions like fatty liver, for instance.
Amazing. Dandelion is also extremely high in antioxidants. The flowers apparently are a very high source of polyphenols. They also support the production of glutathione, which is also amazing.
Well, anything with lecithin, again, that phosphatidylserine, phosphatidylcholine, while the phosphatidylcholine is very beneficial for liver health, anything that provides the body choline will actually help the body make what's called acetylcholine, which is very beneficial for overall cognitive health and muscular health as well. Phosphatidylcholine specifically is beneficial for supporting memory, recollection, as far as the cognitive benefits go. And phosphatidylserine is basically a fatty component that is found in high concentrations in nerve tissue. What's interesting is the further down the plant you get, the stronger the diuretic effect is. So the root will have the strongest effect.
It is also very good for those with type 2 diabetes, excellent for balancing blood sugars.
Yeah, it's been shown to help the pancreas actually produce insulin.
Yeah, a lot of these bitter greens are really not valued in the American West. You know, a lot of European cultures really value their bitter greens and love them. There's just so many health benefits to them. I believe dandelion is also good for lowering cholesterol and blood pressure as well.
Yeah, more about the bitterness. We have receptors on the back of our tongue. When they come in contact with something bitter, it actually activates the vagus nerve, which is kind of that neuronal highway between your brain and your gut. that also is part of the activation of your parasympathetic nervous system for healthy stress responses, as well as stimulation of the entire digestive system, all the way from producing adequate amounts of stomach acid to your pancreas producing enzymes to break down food, to bile production in the liver, and peristalsis, a healthy movement of the intestines. Yeah, vagus nerve. So you have to taste the bitterness. The more you squint, the better it is for you. Dandelion has also been known to be very supportive of healthy inflammation levels in a variety of different ways.
It is worth mentioning that there are people groups in the world, like areas of Greece and Italy, that eat a lot of dandelions and chicory and other leafy greens in the rugged mountains that just have great longevity. It's just so good for you in so many ways. So such a rich plant, and we're so thankful for it. And we always, we let them do their thing, and the roots kind of go down into the soil because these tap roots are very strong and really resilient and deep. And that also helps break up the soil. When we pull these dandelions, we will try to pull them by the root a lot of times so we can get some of the root. We barely ever get all the root, so it's going to grow back. But, if we do get the full root, that's great too, because it does keep them in check a little bit. So some wonderful things to do with dandelions as far as eating them and benefiting off of all their goodness. Number one is just eating the leaves raw, especially when they're young, when it is in the beginning of spring, sometimes towards the end of the fall as well. You can just chop them up into salads. I would rarely see anyone have a full-on dandelion salad. I think that would be a little strong. If you can stomach a small salad of dandelions, maybe do that. But otherwise, just recommending chopping it up and putting it along with your lettuce and other greens in your salad to accompany the salad to make just something so healthy for you. So you can eat them raw, especially when they're young and tender. Another great and basic way to prepare these, as I mentioned, as the Greeks do, is just to create that dish of boiled or steamed dandelions. It tastes delicious. You really don't have to boil them for that long, but the length of time is really up to you. The more you boil the greens, the more mild the greens are. But usually we'll boil them for about 15-20 minutes, and then we're going to take them out of the boiled water because we're going to have this tonight during TJ's visit with us here. We're going to take it out of the water and put some olive oil on it, maybe a little lemon juice, a little bit of salt, and it is a beautiful dish served just like that, and usually really nice and tender and very nourishing. So the water that remains after boiling or steaming is very medicinal. That's basically your dandelion tea. Sometimes they recommend not to drink and just discard the water for certain greens, for instance, amaranth, or even spinach, which are high in oxalates. You're not going to have that issue with dandelion. So if you can boil your dandelions and then enjoy that water either cold or warm, I love it. Sometimes if we add a little bit of salt to the water, it just makes for a delicious drink, or you can just keep the salt out until later. You can sweeten it with honey later. I just think it's a great treat and also really good for you. It's just a good tonic. And while we boil, we'll actually boil this entire thing after washing with the flower and the root, because I like to get every part of the dandelion, if present. It's just excellent. Otherwise, you can make a medicinal tea from dried dandelion leaves or dried dandelion roots, or fresh dandelion roots. And if you don't like eating the greens, you can just take your dandelions like this and boil them into a very nourishing and very cleansing tea. Speaking of drying, the Greeks also practice drying the leaves during the spring so that they can actually rehydrate the leaves and boil them just as they usually would all year round. So you can eat your wild boiled or steamed greens anytime just by reviving the dried leaves. You can do that by hanging them to dry or just using a dehydrator. Doesn't take very long to dry these out at all. You could also spread them out on a sheet and keep them in a dry place. Pretty easy. And then you just put them in a bag. Another way we use the dandelions, because there are just so many ways, we will actually make dandelion wine. Maybe we'll do a video on that. And that's really what my wife does amazingly. But, she'll take these blossoms and just put them in with a few different aromatic ingredients and make a beautiful wine, I know that there's got to be some amazing health benefits to that. And yet another way to enjoy dandelions is to make a tincture or an extract simply by chopping up all the parts and filling up a ball jar all the way up to the top, and then filling that jar to the same line, enough to cover whatever the material is in there, with alcohol, definitely 40% or higher. So we typically will just use a decent vodka to do that. Yeah, I've also heard of making fritters with the flowers, frying them up, so you're getting that awesome benefit of the flowers. I know we've done that with squash blossoms. It's an Italian thing. I would love to try that with this, so maybe we'll try that this year. So I hope you enjoyed this video about the beauty and the power and the nutrition of this amazing plant and very useful plant. My mother was always right about the dandelion. Feel free to comment below if you have any other input, ideas, things that you've done traditionally to prepare dandelions. We'd love to hear them. Until next time.
Stop spraying the dandelion and eat it.